The psychology of the fool, from the shadowy thresholds of ancient myths to the glittering stage of Shakespeare's theater, from the painted face of the medieval jester to the androgynous figure in the tarot. One image has persisted with curious resilience: the fool. He is laughed at, feared, mocked, sometimes revered, yet never ignored. Beneath his tattered cloak and feathered cap hides not the absence of meaning, but its paradoxical excess. For the fool, above all, is not just a character. He is an archetype, and like all true archetypes, he is a mirror to the soul. Carl Jung once remarked that archetypes are not invented, but discovered. They are not decorative relics of folklore, but living patterns within the human psyche, universal blueprints inherited from the collective experience of our species. The fool, in this light, is not merely a clown who stumbles for amusement. He is the essential counterweight to rigidity, the jester who whispers dangerous truths behind the mask of laughter, and most importantly, the hidden initiator of transformation. He represents the untamed spark before the first step is taken, the zero that precedes the one. In Hermetic philosophy, the number 0 is sacred. It is not nothingness, but potentiality, the Ein Sof of Kabbalah, the unmanifested source before manifestation. In the tarot, the fool is assigned the number 0, not by accident, but by cosmic design. He is the origin and the destination, the alpha and the omega, yet belongs to neither. He walks with his head tilted toward the stars, not because he is ignorant, but because he sees what others have forgotten. He walks not away from society, but beyond it into the space where real seeing begins. This figure, ragged, laughing, and unbothered, has haunted every civilization in one form or another. In Egyptian cosmology, he is echoed in the trickster deities such as Set, whose chaotic energies ultimately contribute to the balance of Ma'at. In Greek tradition, he appears as Hermes, the god of transitions and boundaries, messenger of the gods, the thief, the fool, and the alchemist. In Norse lore, he takes shape as Loki, a shape shifter whose mischief brings both ruin and revelation. Even the sacred geometry of the flower of life suggests that creation itself stems from a principle that is spontaneous, circular, unbound, foolish. In the best sense of the word, what then makes the fool so compelling, so vital? Perhaps it is because he disrupts the illusions we mistake for truth. He shows us that seriousness, when left unchallenged, solidifies into dogma. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, reminds us that duality's reason and madness, knowledge and ignorance, form and void, are not opposites, but reflections. The fool inhabits this liminal space. He is not the absence of wisdom, but its precondition. In his laughter, the seeds of logos are planted. Modern society, in contrast, has little patience for the fool. Efficiency is idolized, productivity sanctified. The result is a mechanization of the soul, a subtle enslavement to the illusion of control. But the fool calls us back to something ancient, something primal. He invites us to dance barefoot in the rain, to laugh at our own seriousness, to surrender our curated identities at the altar of spontaneity. This is not regression, but revolution, a spiritual anarchy that rekindles the forgotten art of being. Indeed, the absence of the fool within us breeds a sterility of spirit. Without his courage to be ridiculous, we become performative actors, fearful of embarrassment, imprisoned by the gaze of others. Yet it is often in our most foolish moments when we risk vulnerability, speak awkward truths, or follow a path no one understands that we stumble into the sacred. In alchemical terms, the fool is the prima materia, the undifferentiated base from which the great work begins. The magnum opus cannot proceed without him, for transformation is born from the chaos he embodies. As we begin this exploration, let us then suspend judgment and walk alongside the fool, not to mock him, not even to understand him, but to become him. For in becoming the fool, we do not abandon wisdom. We return to it through the back door, the path of paradox, laughter, and love. The fool is in exile, not because he has been cast out, but because he has never truly belonged. He exists at the margins of society, the edges of convention, the cracks in the wall of normalcy through which divine light slips. He does not merely question authority, he dances in its face. And yet, this outsider is indispensable, for it is often the figure outside the walls who best sees what happens within. In ancient courts, the jester was the only one permitted to mock the king, not because he was harmless, but because he was sacred. Behind his painted grin and cap and bells, he was not a clown, but a mirror. His jests concealed daggers of insight. His riddles carried truths too volatile to be spoken plainly. His madness was his immunity. He could say what no advisor dared to whisper, and in this way, he became the silent guardian of truth. This sacred privilege echoes throughout time. In the Hermetic tradition, Thoth, god of wisdom, magic, and language, was also a trickster. The Greeks merged him with Hermes, another divine mischief maker. These beings do not tell the truth politely. They smuggle it past the guards of ego with misdirection and irony. They veil it in laughter because truth delivered naked can burn. The fool, then, is not foolish because he does not know. He is foolish because he knows too much and chooses to disarm the world with humor rather than confrontation. This is no minor detail. In esoteric schools, such as the mystery cults of Eleusis, laughter was part of the initiation process. The absurd was sacred. The initiate passed through the realm of the irrational, the paradoxical, and the dreamlike precisely because reality is not logical. As in dreams, what appears ridiculous often contains the most vital symbols. The fool is the gatekeeper of this domain. His language is jest, his message veiled, his wisdom hidden in buffoonery. But not all fools are made alike. The ancient world distinguished between two kinds, the natural fool and the professional fool. The natural fool is one who, by temperament or birth, lacks social inhibition. His innocence makes him stumble upon truths without intent. He may be seen as sad, but often it is a madness that has clarity within it. In Zen Buddhism, this figure appears as the Yoroshi, the holy madman who defies form and yet brings sudden awakening. He wanders, laughs, and strikes students with sticks not out of cruelty, but to jolt them from illusion, the professional fool. By contrast, is cunning. He dons the mask with full awareness. He is the Shakespearean fool, a wordsmith, a philosopher, a comic bard who uses wit like a scalpel. In King Lear, the fool alone dares confront the king with his hubris, his blindness, his descent into ruin. Thou shouldst not have been old till thou hadst been wise. He quips not cruelly, but as one who knows the medicine of mockery. This blend of comedy and truth, of folly and insight, births a paradox, the wise fool. The oxymoron is intentional, for it collapses the binaries our minds cling to. It is the fool who brings the king to tears. It is the jester who sees the future. It is the madman who tells the truth no one else dares. Even the Bible declares, God has chosen the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. St. Paul called himself a fool for Christ, mocking the false wisdom of the world while embracing divine madness. And so, the fool becomes the redeemer, not through authority, but through authenticity. He saves not by conquering, but by collapsing the illusion. He does not wield power, he undermines it. And by doing so, he gives it meaning, like the Joker. He may appear chaotic, but his laughter reveals a deeper horror, the hypocrisy of order, the emptiness of law without soul. In the modern world, this truth-telling fool has become dangerous. He is suppressed, sanitized, or turned into entertainment. But in the ancient world, he was feared and respected. The Hermetic principle of polarity states, everything is dual. Everything has poles. The fool lives in this space of polarity. He is not only a symbol of liberation, but of warning. The clown may make us laugh or haunt our nightmares. The court jester may delight or be beheaded for going too far. The truth is not always welcome. The fool is tolerated only as long as his truth remains comfortable. Yet there is a silent heroism in the fool. He speaks not because it is safe, but because it is needed. When all others are silent, the fool becomes the voice, and in that voice tremulous, absurd, unsettling, we hear an echo of our own repressed knowing. He redeems not by proving anything, but by unmasking everything. To walk the path of the fool is to accept the sacred burden of authenticity. It is to risk laughter, exile, misunderstanding. But it is also to touch something eternal, the freedom of being fully oneself in a world addicted to masks. Across the worn paths of legend and the candlelit pages of old epics, we meet the fool again and again, not as a clown, but as a pilgrim, a seeker, a holy wanderer whose very simplicity becomes the compass of his journey. He wears no armor, carries no sword, and bears no badge of intellect. Yet time after time, he stumbles into the very heart of truth, while the wise and powerful remain trapped in labyrinths of their own making. In this, the fool becomes the ultimate paradox. The one who knows the least often sees the most. The myth of Parsifal is perhaps one of the most archetypal examples of the sacred fool's journey. Parsifal, whose name is often translated as pure fool, grows up in innocence and ignorance, far from the world of men and war. When he first sees knights in shining armor, he believes they are angels. This naivete, far from being ridiculed, is presented as a form of spiritual clarity, a kind of childlike vision unclouded by cynicism. When he later embarks on his quest for the Holy Grail, it is this same simplicity that both blesses and curses him. In the Grail Castle, he witnesses the Fisher King suffering a wound that will not heal, a kingdom turned barren. All that is needed to lift the curse is a question, simple yet profound. Whom does the Grail serve? But Parsifal, bound by social conventions and maternal warnings not to speak out of turn, remains silent, and so he fails. The castle vanishes. His shame becomes the beginning of wisdom. 20 years pass before he finds the Grail Castle again. And this time, he asks the question. This moment, often missed by scholars of mere intellect, is charged with metaphysical significance. Redemption does not lie in knowledge, but in the courage to ask from the heart. This same theme appears in Russian folklore through the beloved figure of Ivan the Fool. He is mocked by his brothers, tricked by devils, and dismissed by kings, yet he emerges victorious, not by cunning, but by kindness. He listens to animals, helps strangers, and shows mercy even to demons. He is rich not in gold, but in spirit. While others chase power and wealth, Ivan simply follows his heart, and by doing so, he transforms the world around him. This fool, in his quiet rebellion against greed and glory, becomes a Christ-like figure, redeeming his land not through conquest, but through innocence. In the Spanish masterpiece Don Quixote, Cervantes paints another variation of the fool. Don Quixote, maddened by tales of chivalry, dons a rusted suit of armor and rides forth on a broken horse. Mistaking windmills for giants and peasant girls for princesses, he is delusional. Yes, but in a world drunk on cynicism, his madness becomes a kind of sacred clarity. He fights for virtue in a society that has forgotten what virtue even means. His very failure is poetic, and his delusions expose the deeper delusion of a world that has lost its capacity to dream. His companion, Sancho Panza, serves as the grounded counterpoint, the archetype of the realist. Yet even Sancho, over time, is infected by Quixote's idealism. The fool, once again, is not merely a joke, but a carrier of contagious hope. Don Quixote reminds us that to live in fantasy is sometimes more noble than to die in apathy. When he finally awakens from his madness, the light goes out, and the reader is left mourning not the loss of sanity, but the loss of beauty. All of these figures, Parsifal, Ivan, Quixote, wear the garments of folly, They are mocked, misunderstood, and often misused. And yet, they walk closer to the divine than any sage or scholar. What connects them is not intellect, but purity of heart. Their paths are not direct. Their victories are not loud, but their stories linger like incense, haunting the memory with a truth too delicate for doctrine. From the Hermetic perspective, this is deeply significant. In the Emerald Tablet of Thoth, it is said, "That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below. The fool, in his lowliness, mirrors the highest." In alchemy, the fool corresponds to the prima materia, the unshaped, unrefined substance that must undergo transmutation. And transmutation does not begin with power. It begins with surrender. The fool's journey is not about achievement. It is about becoming. It is about letting go of what we think we know, so that we may discover what the soul already understands. It is a pilgrimage, not of conquest, but of return. A return to the heart, to simplicity, to the laughter of a child who does not yet know shame. To be a fool, in this sacred sense, is to be courageous enough to remain open in a world that demands you harden. It is to ask the question no one dares to ask, to offer kindness without calculation, and to walk barefoot through the thorns of misunderstanding, simply because something within says, "This is the way," in a culture obsessed with control, mastery, and image. The fool reminds us that there is a deeper intelligence, one that plays, stumbles, forgives, and forgets, and in that forgetfulness finds truth. He is the divine idiot, the silent mystic, the hidden philosopher in rags, the one who walks into the Grail castle not with answers, but with awe. In the silent geometry of the tarot, the fool stands at the threshold, 1 foot lifted, eyes cast skyward, seemingly unaware of the cliff's edge beneath him. A small dog leaps at his heel. A sack of belongings swings gently from his shoulder, and in one hand, he holds a white rose, symbol of innocence, of untainted being. He is the unnumbered card, or rather, the card of no number, 0, neither first nor last, neither here nor there, and yet he is the beginning and the end. 0, a number feared by logic and revered by mystics. It is the cipher, the womb, the void, the circle that contains all things and yet remains empty. In Hermeticism, 0 represents the unmanifested divine, the Ein, the nothing that is the source of all. The fool, as 0, is not lacking meaning, but bursting with potential. He is the seed before the tree, the silence before the word, the breath before the first cry of birth. In the major arcana, the 20, 2 keys to inner transformation, the fool is both the initiate and the master. He begins the journey as a wanderer, open-hearted and unaware, and ends it as the cosmic dancer in card 21, the world. The final card depicts the union of opposites, the fulfillment of the soul's pilgrimage through illusion into self, realization. And yet, this final state is not a stopping point, but a return for after wholeness. The spiral begins again. Thus, the fool is eternal. He does not walk a straight line, but an ever-widening road. Carl Jung understood this. He saw the archetypes of the tarot as reflections of the individuation process, the alchemical unfolding of the psyche toward integration of the self. The fool, to Jung, is the pure eternus, the eternal youth, the part of us that resists conformity, that dreams wildly, that leaps before looking. He is both the shadow and the seed of transformation. When we suppress him, we become rigid. When we follow him, we risk chaos, but we also risk awakening. The tarot, like the psyche, is not a linear script, but a mandala of experience. Each card is a station on the soul's journey, and the fool passes through them not as a tourist, but as a mirror. He reflects back to us the degree to which we have embraced life's dance. The hermit, the magician, the lovers, the hanged man. All our faces the fool must wear and shed. He gains wisdom through falling, beauty through bruises, courage through absurdity. His gift is not mastery, but motion. His path is not logic, but logos, the living word. And yet, the fool is not merely a spiritual metaphor. He is a psychological necessity. In a world that demands certainty, he embraces ambiguity. In a society that fears failure, he dares to begin. To follow the fool is not to lose one's mind, but to recover the mind's forgotten child. The child who still believes in wonder, who still asks why, who still dares to believe that something beautiful might lie just beyond the cliff. The Rider, Waite Tarot, one of the most iconic modern decks, captures this archetypal moment vividly. Illustrated by Pamela Coleman Smith under the guidance of Mystic A. E. Waite. Both members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The deck integrates Christian mysticism, Kabbalah, alchemy, and astrology. In it, the fool is depicted on the brink of a precipice, blissfully unaware, or perhaps perfectly trusting. The little dog may be warning him, or may be his guide. The bundle he carries is tiny, suggesting that all he needs is already within. Nothing more, nothing less. This symbolism echoes the ancient maxim of the Delphic oracle. Know thyself. The fool does not seek to accumulate, to conquer, or to control. He seeks only to experience, to become. In this way, he echoes the Hermetic idea that all is in all, that the microcosm contains the macrocosm, that the spark within contains the whole flame. His journey is the inward journey made outward, the internal path written across the sky. There is a sacred boldness to this archetype in a world that exalts the emperor, the hierophant, the chariot figures of power, tradition. And Will the Fool reminds us that none of them began without first stepping into the unknown. Before the sword was drawn, before the crown was placed, before the law was carved, there was a moment of foolish courage. A moment where someone, somewhere, said, "What if?" And herein lies the fool's true power. He precedes the system. He arrives before language, before doctrine, before hierarchy. He is the whisper in the dark, the urge to move, the impulse to dream. He does not defy structure, he dances around it until the structure loosens and breathes again. He is, in alchemical terms, the mercury of the soul, that which unbinds the fixed, that which dissolves the rigid, that which makes transformation possible. He is also, perhaps, the figure closest to the divine. In Gnostic and Hermetic cosmology, God is not a figure on a throne, but a light that plays, creates, transforms. The fool carries this light, though he may not know it. His madness is holy because it reveals the madness of the world, a world that has forgotten to laugh, to play, to risk the unknown. To walk with the fool is to remember that the journey itself is the destination, that the path is made by walking. That failure is not a curse, but a compass. That the treasure we seek is not out there. It is the heart brave enough to seek. To be a fool in the sacred sense is to return to the threshold of wonder, not armed with answers, but emptied of certainty. The Japanese Zen concept of shoshin, or beginner's mind, captures this state with crystalline clarity. It is the mental posture of one who sees the world as if for the first time, not with naivety, but with openness. In shoshin, knowledge is not a possession, but a silence, a space into which the unknown may whisper. The fool, though clothed in rags or jest, embodies shoshin. He walks through life without rigid filters, without pretension. He is not striving to be an expert, to be right, to be respected. In fact, he relinquishes these very pursuits. He risks being ridiculous, misjudged, rejected, all in service of a deeper freedom. This is not stupidity. It is radical surrender. A surrender to not knowing, to the possibility that what lies ahead cannot be measured, only experienced. Carl Jung understood that this surrender is not weakness, it is transformation. In psychological terms, the fool represents the inferior function, the least developed part of our psyche, often buried under social masks and rational constructs. But it is this very inferiority, this softness, that opens the door to wholeness. It is the fool within who leads us down into the underworld of our own psyche, into the shadow, into the wound, into the mystery. And what does he find there? Madness, disorientation, loss, but also renewal. There is a sacred link between folly and healing, between madness and vision. In ancient cultures, the line between the fool and the prophet was thin or non-existent. The Delphic oracle spoke in riddles. Shamans trembled, convulsed, or laughed in ecstasy. The sibyls uttered truths no one could decode. In each case, it was through the suspension of logic that divine insight was received. The mind had to break in order for the soul to speak. Modern psychology gives this another name, the healing crisis, a period of breakdown, disillusionment, or confusion that precedes breakthrough. The fool does not avoid this descent. He walks into it willingly. He is not afraid of chaos, because he carries the seed of creation within it. Just as in Hermetic alchemy, the negredo, or blackening, is the first stage of the great work, so too must the psyche descend into its darkness before it can be transmuted. In literature, we find this descent beautifully depicted in Dostoevsky's The Idiot. Prince Mishkin is labeled an idiot by society because he is pure-hearted, direct, incapable of manipulation. In a corrupt and cynical world, this makes him appear foolish. And yet, his insights pierce deeper than any philosopher's. He does not debate God. He lives as if God is real. He does not condemn sinners. He sits beside them, speaks to them, and bears witness to their pain. And in doing so, he heals. But the healing he offers is not clinical or procedural. It is existential. It is the healing of being seen, without judgment. It is the restoration of human dignity in a world that has forgotten it. Mishkin does not fix people. He reminds them that they are already whole. This is the true gift of the fool, not to solve, but to soften, not to lead, but to invite. In the tarot, the fool carries only a small satchel. He brings nothing with him because he needs nothing. His true power lies in this emptiness. As the Tao Te Ching teaches, it is the empty space within the cup that makes it useful. In the same way, it is the fool's openness, his not, knowing that allows insight to enter. When we are too full of answers, nothing can surprise us. And when nothing can surprise us, nothing can change us. But transformation is not always pleasant. The fool may tumble. He may fall from grace, from logic, from social respectability. His journey often leads through humiliation, not because he is wrong, but because he refuses to conform. This is where many turn back. This is where the voice of the inner critic, the shadow fool, begins to whisper. You'll make a fool of yourself. You don't belong. Who do you think you are? These voices are the guardians of the known world. They do not want change. They want safety. But the fool walks past them anyway, trembling, perhaps, but undeterred. He trusts that even if he falls, the fall itself has meaning, that even failure contains fire. The Stoics understood this too. Epictetus wrote, "It's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them." The fool lives this truth. He does not judge the fall. He laughs. He gets up. He keeps walking. And in that act, he becomes untouchable. Not because he is powerful, but because he has released the illusion that he must be. In the alchemical model, this moment of foolishness, this willingness to stumble, is the catalyst for the albedo, the whitening. A new clarity, a new softness begins to emerge. The soul becomes receptive. The fool, having embraced his own ignorance, becomes ready to receive true wisdom, not borrowed truth, but the kind earned in silence, in suffering, in surrender. He reminds us that not knowing is not a curse, it is a doorway. That confusion is not failure, it is the seedbed of revelation. That madness is not the end. It is the place where the known burns away and the sacred begins. Though they both wear the mask of mischief, the fool and the trickster walk two very different paths. To the untrained eye, they appear similar. Both subvert expectation, both wield humor, both turn order on its head, but their intent, their energy, their spiritual gravity could not be more opposed. If the fool is the liberator of the soul, then the trickster is its saboteur. One disarms through innocence, the other deceives through manipulation. One exposes illusion with a laugh that includes, while the other mocks with a laugh that excludes. The trickster thrives on schadenfreude, the dark pleasure of watching others stumble. He sets traps, not to awaken, but to control. He masks his insecurity with superiority. His laughter echoes with hidden bitterness, always at someone's expense. We see this in figures like Loki of Norse mythology, a being of wit and chaos, who tears down the divine, not out of wisdom, but out of envy. Even in modern culture, the trickster appears as the prankster, the deceiver, the puppet master, often clever, but rarely kind, the fool. By contrast, is not clever. He is true. His laughter carries no sting. He does not play games, he lives them. When he jokes with the audience, not at them. And when he stumbles, he laughs at himself, not to lower his own dignity, but to disarm fear. In this, he performs a sacred alchemy, turning shame into freedom, mistake into mirth, weakness into shared humanity. To laugh at oneself and invite others to laugh with you is one of the most powerful spiritual acts available to a human being. This is what makes the fool indispensable in any honest society. He reminds us that perfection is a fiction, and that our flaws are what make us lovable. The trickster, on the other hand, would have us hide those flaws or weaponize them against others. His smile is sharp, his charm a veneer. He is not interested in healing only an advantage, but the distinction between the two is not always easy. In fact, much of our modern entertainment blurs the line. Reality television, viral videos, even political satire often veer into trickster territory, encouraging us to laugh at someone else's downfall, to elevate ourselves through mockery. This is not the humor of the fool. This is the defense mechanism of a culture terrified of vulnerability. The fool, when present in his authentic form, does the opposite. He removes the mask. He says, "Look, I am ridiculous, and so are you. Let us laugh and be free." His role is not to dominate, but to soften. In the presence of the fool, the harsh structures of the ego begin to loosen. The inner critic becomes quieter. The need to impress, to defend, to posture dissolves. And in its place, something fragile and beautiful appears. Authenticity. From a Hermetic standpoint, this act of laughing at oneself is not merely psychological, it is metaphysical. It is the reconciliation of opposites, the coincidentia oppositorum, the marriage of high and low, sacred and profane. The moment we can laugh at our spiritual ambition, at our solemnity, at our very need to appear wise, that is the moment true wisdom begins. For then, we are no longer clinging to the persona. We are free to be real. The alchemists had a phrase for this process: solve et coagula, dissolve and reform. The Fool embodies this. He dissolves our attachments, our identities, our seriousness, not by force, but by play, and in their place, something more honest can take shape. In many fairy tales, the fool is the only one who dares to speak the truth, not because he is brave, but because he does not know fear. He says the emperor has no clothes. He interrupts the ritual with a joke. He reminds the king of his mortality with a pun. And by doing so, he brings the entire structure of power back down to earth. This is not rebellion. It is grounding. It is a sacred return to humility. The Jungian analyst Louise von Franz once noted that the fool corresponds to the inferior function, the weakest part of the psyche, the one we try to hide. But when honored, this part becomes the gateway to the unconscious, the bridge to the self. The fool, in this way, becomes a mediator between shadow and light, between conscious and unconscious, between the self we show and the self we are. The trickster, by contrast, refuses this bridge. He clings to the mask, manipulates the shadow, and uses others to avoid facing his own emptiness. His tricks are a distraction. The fool's tricks, if we can call them that, are invitations to drop the act and simply be. In a moment of deep tension in a funeral, a crisis, a political collapse, it is often the fool who offers a moment of relief, not by diminishing the gravity of the moment, but by revealing its humanity. One joke, placed gently, can burst the bubble of fear. One self-deprecating story can invite the room to breathe. The sacred fool knows this instinctively. His timing is not rehearsed. It arises from attunement to others, to energy, to spirit. But this is not always welcomed. To be a fool is to risk being misunderstood. To laugh at oneself in a room of the overly serious is to seem irreverent. To interrupt dogma with joy is to invite exile. This is why the fool is so often pushed to the margins of society, of religion, of philosophy, but he remains, watching, waiting ready to return when the world becomes too brittle to bear its own weight. And when he does return, it is never with judgment, only with a grin, a shrug, and perhaps a flower behind his ear. Beneath the painted smile of the modern clown lies a silence that screams. The fool who once danced in sacred temples and whispered wisdom in the king's ear now stands under a neon spotlight, performing for a world that rarely hears his pain. Laughter once used to liberate has become a mask, not a mirror. This is the tragedy of the modern fool. He is still present, but he is no longer seen. This sorrow is not new, though it has grown louder. In psychology, it has a name: the sad clown paradox. It is the phenomenon wherein those who evoke the most laughter are often those who suffer the most: depression, anxiety, even suicidal ideation frequently haunt comedians and performers whose lives revolve around making others laugh. This is not irony. It is a spiritual wound, one that opens when the fool is reduced to mere entertainment, stripped of his sacred role as healer, truth, teller, and transformer. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But when society only accepts the fool's performance, not his depth, not his tears, the burden becomes unbearable. He is allowed to joke, but not to weep. He is welcomed in the spotlight, but banished in silence. In this, the fool becomes a symbol of cultural denial, a reflection of our own discomfort with vulnerability, pain, and contradiction. We see this shadow fully embodied in the figure of the Joker, perhaps the most powerful and disturbing modern evolution of the fool archetype. The Joker is not just a villain, he is a mirror held up to a world that no longer knows how to feel. In various cinematic renditions, the Joker is portrayed as a man broken by society, alienated, invisible, gaslit by systems designed to numb. His transformation into chaos incarnate is not an arbitrary descent into evil. It is a reaction, a response to a civilization that has lost touch with empathy, where madness becomes the only language left to speak. And yet, even as he burns down the old order, the Joker forces us to ask, who really is mad here? Is it the man who laughs uncontrollably while descending into psychosis? Or the world that engineered his fall with indifference, cruelty, and spectacle? The true horror of the Joker is not that he is insane, but that his madness makes a kind of sense. In ancient times, clowns and fools were allowed to carry both light and darkness. During the medieval Feast of Fools, all roles were reversed. Bishops were mocked, sacred rites parodied. Chaos reigned for a day, not as blasphemy, but as catharsis. It was understood that to keep order, we must sometimes embrace disorder. Laughter, even the grotesque kind, was medicine for the collective psyche. It released the tension beneath the surface. Let steam escape before the vessel shattered. But in the modern world, that wisdom has been lost. We no longer allow the fool his full spectrum. He must be funny, clean, safe, or not at all. The fool who speaks uncomfortable truths is quickly labeled offensive. The clown who cries is forgotten. The jester who jabs too hard at power is silenced. This cultural flattening of the fool reflects our fear of contradiction, our hunger for control. And yet, despite this, the fool returns. In the comedian who dares to tell the truth behind the joke. In the awkward child who laughs in class to hide his pain. In the viral video that makes millions smile, unaware of the sorrow behind the eyes. The fool is always with us, even when ignored. And in his silent suffering, he teaches us still to see the fool fully. We must reclaim the holiness of paradox. We must allow that laughter and grief are not opposites, they are twins. Two expressions of the soul's awe at the absurdity of being alive. The fool laughs because the world is unbearable. He cries because it is beautiful. He knows that we can only survive the darkness by dancing through it. And he knows that behind every joke is a longing to be held, to be heard, to be whole. The Hermetic law of rhythm tells us that all things rise and fall, joy and sorrow, gain and loss, order and chaos. The fool embodies this rhythm. He does not fight the swing of the pendulum. He rides it. And when we watch him, really watch him, we are invited to do the same. Not to pretend we are always fine, not to seek constant pleasure, but to embrace the full, messy, magnificent dance of life. Perhaps that is why so many are afraid of clowns today. It is not their painted faces or their wild movements. It is the shadow they carry, the whisper that beneath the makeup lies a truth too raw to name. We fear the fool not because he is ridiculous, but because he is real. And yet, we need him, desperately. For without the fool, without the laughter that breaks our masks, the sorrow that cracks our pride, the play that softens our pain, we become brittle. We become machines. And the soul does not survive in a machine. It survives in tears, in mistakes, in the kind of foolishness that dares to love a broken world anyway. In every myth worth retelling, there comes a moment when the hero must leave behind the known world and step across a threshold into the wild, the unknown, the terrifying. This is the point of no return. The dragons await. The gods may strike him. And yet, it is here, at this precipice, that the fool stands smiling, ready to leap. The fool is not merely the beginning of the journey. He is the gatekeeper of thresholds, the one who dares to cross borders others refuse to see. His presence signals the shift from the comfortable to the mystical, from the profane to the sacred. In this way, he is not just an archetype, he is a psychopomp, a guide between realms, much like Hermes or Thoth, who moved freely between the world of gods and men, between the living and the dead. To step into the unknown is to die a little. This is not poetic flourish. It is psychological truth. As Carl Jung writes, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The self must dissolve, must shed old skin, must descend into darkness before new light can be born. The fool does this not reluctantly, but with laughter. His leap off the cliff is not blind, it is surrendered. He knows, somehow, that what lies beyond is not destruction, but transformation. In tarot, the card that often follows the fool is death, a figure cloaked in black, riding calmly as the world mourns its passing. But death is not the end, it is the clearing. The compost, the field before the seed. The fool knows this. His white rose symbol of innocence is also a symbol of purity after corruption, clarity after confusion. He walks toward death, not because he seeks it, but because he accepts it. This acceptance is no small thing. In the ancient mystery schools of Egypt, Greece, and later Rome, initiates were required to undergo symbolic death before they could be reborn as enlightened beings. This death could take many forms: isolation, silence, fasting, terrifying visions, but always it was designed to dissolve the ego. The initiate would re-emerge changed, aware of a deeper identity beyond name and form. The fool is the soul, before that death, the only one unafraid to enter the cave, as the Kabbalion teaches, to destroy an error. One must bring a positive truth to bear upon it. The fool does not fight illusions head on. He outgrows them. He walks past them. He sees through them because he has no need to defend anything. What makes him appear foolish to the world is what makes him wise in the realm of the soul. He does not cling. He flows. This is why the fool so often appears in moments of spiritual awakening. He represents the lightness that descends when one finally lets go of dogma, of control, of the endless effort to be right. He teaches that salvation does not come through effort, but through surrender. Not passivity, but a radical openness to the unfolding of the mystery. In Jungian terms, this is the process of individuation, the journey of integrating all aspects of the self, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious. But the journey cannot begin until the ego is humbled, until the persona cracks, until the one who thought he knew the way becomes willing to walk with empty hands. That is the fool's gift. He begins the journey not by knowing, but by not knowing, and in doing so, he invites grace. Myth and folklore are rich with examples. In Celtic tradition, the Gaelt was a wild man, driven mad by a divine encounter, who wandered the forest reciting poetry and living with the deer. His madness was not sickness, but sacred unbinding. In the Sufi path, the Majdub is a holy fool one who appears insane to the world, but is actually drunk on divine love. His ecstasy cannot be contained in social norms. His joy defies explanation. He walks in two worlds, even in Christianity. The fool appears in disguise. Saint Francis of Assisi, often called God's jester, stripped naked in the public square to renounce his father's wealth and walked barefoot into a life of divine poverty. His madness, like that of the fool, was liberation from false identity. He chose the love of birds, beggars, and lepers over power and prestige, and became one of the most revered saints in history. So why does the fool scare us? Why do we resist his path? Because the fool reveals the prison we have built around ourselves, the rigid identities, the rules, the fears disguised as common sense. He asks us to question everything. Why do you work? Why do you pray? Why do you fear failure? Who told you that success meant security? And most frightening of all, what might happen if you let go? The answer is not always easy. Letting go may bring loss. It may bring exile, confusion, even madness, but it may also bring truth. For in every spiritual tradition, the greatest awakening happens not on mountaintops, but in wilderness, in the belly of the whale, in the desert, in the place where the map ends and the fool begins. This is the spiritual power of foolishness. It breaks the spell of false certainty. It dissolves the boundaries between sacred and mundane. It opens the gate to what the alchemists called the true work, the turning of lead into gold, not in a laboratory, but in the soul. And so the fool becomes not just a wanderer, but a guide, a psycho-spiritual Sherpa. He does not lead with force. He walks ahead with trust. And when we are finally tired of pretending, of performing, of trying to hold it all together, we may hear his laugh echoing in the distance and feel something in us stir. Not fear, not resistance, but recognition. It is then that we remember. The path we feared was always ours to walk. And the fool, smiling at the edge of the unknown, is simply our own soul, calling us home. There comes a point in every sacred journey when the traveler ceases to seek outward signs and begins to read the symbols within. The fool, who once appeared as an aimless wanderer at the edge of society, now stands revealed as the deepest aspect of ourselves, the soul before conditioning, the self before story. His rags were never a disguise. They were the unveiling of what the world fears most: authenticity unguarded, being unmasked. To call him the final archetype would be a mistake. The fool is not the end. He is the eternal recurrence. His number is 0, and 0 is the Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its own tail, ancient symbol of infinity, of life feeding into death, feeding into life again. In this sense, the fool is not the first card in tarot by position only, but by essence. He is the seed and the flower, the door and the path, the mirror and the flame. He is the one who leaps and in leaping becomes. In the philosophy of Hermeticism, this movement from fragmentation to wholeness, from illusion to truth, is not just a mental process, it is a spiritual birth. The fool represents the pleroma, the fullness of being in which all opposites are reconciled. The Hermetic maxim, all is one, and one is all, becomes not just a concept, but a lived experience. He who was once called mad for rejecting society's metrics becomes wise through the rediscovery of essence. What you are is what you seek. The Christian mystics, too, touched this realm. Saint Paul wrote, "Let no man deceive himself. If any among you seem to be wise in this world, let him become a fool, that he may be wise." Here is the fool as a spiritual initiator, not because he knows what others do not, but because he dares to unknow. His wisdom is not additive, it is subtractive. He unlearns, he surrenders, he releases the maps, trusting the compass of the heart. He lives in what Zen calls the don't know mind, not as ignorance, but as a posture of reverence before the mystery. This don't know is not a lack, it is a doorway. The Sufi mystic Rumi wrote, "Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment." The fool has done just that. He owns nothing, yet walks with joy. He understands nothing, yet embodies truth. His power lies not in what he can prove, but in what he can embrace. Paradox, beauty, failure, love, and above all, the profound realization that to be alive is itself the miracle. In the fool's world, time bends. Past, present, and future merge in a single breath. As Plotinus taught in Neoplatonism, eternity is the life that belongs to God. The fool touches this eternity not through dogma, but through play. He skips through timelines, dances through lifetimes. Each step is a resurrection. Each stumble is a release. He is not bound by cause and effect, for he walks the inner spiral, where the linear becomes sacred geometry. When we internalize the fool, when we no longer resist his laughter, something begins to shift. The judgments loosen, the masks fall. The parts of us we once disowned, the scared child, the strange dreamer, the wild wanderer, come home. Individuation, in Jungian terms, is complete, not when the ego dominates, but when it bows to something greater. The fool teaches us that this greatness lies not in the heavens, but in the heart unclenched. This is why he appears as the androgynous cosmic dancer in the final card of the major arcana of the world, surrounded by symbols of the four elements, moving in a circle, unified and whole. This is not a destination, but a realization. There is no other place to go. The world is already within. The journey has always been inward. The fool was not moving toward enlightenment. He was enlightenment, disguised in tattered clothes, waiting for us to notice. And yet, the paradox remains. As soon as this realization dawns, as soon as the dance becomes clear, the cycle begins again. The fool appears once more, smiling at the edge of a new cliff, a new life, a new mystery. And this is his final teaching, that awakening is not an escape, but a return, not an arrival, but a remembering. We are all fools, eternally becoming.